music by Joseph Haydn, part of the Fantasia in C, Hoboken 17, number 4. It was played by Alfred Brendel and won him Gramophone's Instrumental Award in 1987, one of his half-dozen awards, which culminated in 2010 with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Alfred Brendel had a long performing career. He gave his first recital in Graz, Austria, when he was 17 in 1948, and he gave his last concert 60 years later in Vienna in December 2008. Early in his career, he recorded for Vox, for whom he made many records of Beethoven's music, including the piano sonatas and concertos, as well as much other solo piano music. Since 1970, he recorded for Philips, with whom he remained until the label was merged with Decca. His repertoire focused on the Austro-German repertoire and embraced the complete Mozart piano concertos, many of the sonatas, the Beethoven piano sonatas and concertos twice, as well as concertos and solo works by Schumann, Brahms and Liszt, and many of Schubert's piano sonatas. Well, January the 5th sees Alfred Brendel turn 90, and he graciously agreed to speak to us for a Gramophone podcast. As Gramophone is a magazine about recording, it seemed a logical place to start by asking him about the role recordings have played in his career and life, and how he approached music making in the studio as opposed to giving concerts.
Recordings have helped me from my 20th year on to be better aware of my playing, to control it and listen to it more precisely. When I record it, I've tried to retain the tension of a concert. Later on, Philips also released a number of my live recordings. Among my CDs, some of those are my favorites. However, they were often not set up as live recordings, but rather were finds among radio broadcasts of the BBC in Salzburg or elsewhere.
And do recordings pose a danger to young musicians while they're learning their craft?
It should not be the purpose of listening to a number of recordings of a piece to observe what others have done and then play it differently to all of them, because it's me. The other end is to copy a performance that one loves as much as possible. One can learn from it, but if you try to copy a performance by Cortot, for instance, you will soon notice that it is much too complex to do so, and that the whole complexity is needed to make sense. The most important source of performance is still the score.
Throughout most classical performers' careers, there's a certain core repertoire that's constantly visited and revisited and often re-recorded. The Beethoven piano sonatas and concertos are a perfect example in your case. Does a new recording supersede an existing recording or supplement it? And if you could, would you have liked to have been able to remove existing recordings when you revisited the same repertoire a second or maybe even a third time?
There were a few recordings that I might have liked to remove, but generally it was my hope that the more recent recordings would supersede the older ones as I've gained in experience, and that they would do so without a loss of technical command. Of course, there proved to be a few exceptions to this rule. Against all common sense, my first recording of Beethoven's Fifth Concerto that I did in my late 20s for Vox seems to me no less compelling in a different way than my last one with Simon Rattle. I sometimes listen to recordings of mine to reassess what they mean to me today. Needless to say, my own preferences vary with age.
Though it moves us slightly away from recorded music, I recall you once talking about composers whose reputations have totally changed during your lifetime. And you mentioned Handel.
The rediscovery of Handel after the war as one of the very great composers was, for me, one of the most revelatory musical gifts of my life. There was a later 19th century prejudice about his stature as a composer, and another one about the dramatic qualities of his operas. Fortunately, they are now overcome, and the necessary singers who do coloratura effortlessly and can cover a wide range of expression as well have emerged in the last decade in astonishing numbers. In my young years, there were barely a handful of singers doing justice to this style and to coloratura in general. How did it happen in such an astonishingly short time? Do you have an answer?
Handel as revisited by Johannes Brahms at the start of his Variations and Fugue on a theme by Handel, Opus 24, a live recording from Vienna's Concerthaus in 1979, and a work Alfred Brendel never recorded in the studio. And we send Alfred Brendel 90th birthday greetings for January the 5th. Gramophone podcasts are free, but if you enjoy them, then a really great way to support our work is to take out a subscription to Gramophone magazine, which is packed full of expert reviews and in-depth articles about the latest classical music releases every month. And if you head over to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and enter the code podcast20 in the checkout, you can even get a 20% discount off any subscription package. We really value your support, and do look out for another Gramophone podcast very soon.